Today we're talking about Dynosim6 and how I will never buy another engine part without using this software. Stick around. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the garage, and this is a video I said last Thursday on the live show that I was going to do for you because I talked about this software. If you're not watching the live show, what are you doing? Thursday nights, 8 Eastern. For that matter, if you're not subscribed, what are you doing? Subscribe, ring the bell, all that jazz. You don't want to miss out. But we're talking about a software called Dynosim6. I'm going to jump over the whiteboard right now so we can kind of see what's going on here. This is the website. Now, Grant, doesn't look like much. I'll give you that. These guys have been around since '94, though, and they've got a lot of software. Dynosim6 is the one that we're interested in. I did try Dynosim5, and the numbers just did not work for me. They were off significantly, things like that. So I had nothing but issues. But the cool thing is you can come in here, select individual software packages. We don't care about Dynomation. Dynosim6 is the one that we're talking about. And it'll give you the option of buying it online or buying the disc. I bought it online. They send you a license, all that. But I did try Dynosim5. It was I don't remember it being that expensive. Oh, you know what? I did desktop Dyno 5. So that one did not get good data in. But I did go ahead, pony up the $150. It's a lot to swallow, but after you watch this, you'll see why. So let's jump over to the software. I'll kind of explain to you what's going on here and what I've done to make all of this make sense. And we'll go over kind of everything that's going on here. Here we've got our dyno chart. This is our exhaust pressure versus our intake pressure, and this is our exhaust velocity versus our intake velocity. And so as you change cams, these are going to change. You can see kind of where we've got some overlap and stuff like that. Now, this first setup I did is based off of the 598 big block that Freiberger did on Engine Masters episode 31. And I want you to pay attention to the dyno curve here because this is the interesting part. If you look at that, we'll pull this up here. It's a little bit more compacted down, but the dyno curve's the same shape, even down to the part. Look at this weird little hump of torque right there. We're getting that right here on this green line. There's our torque. And the thing that's really impressive is our numbers in here. If we come back over and look, what they got on their SureFlow dyno was 835 or 853 at 6300, 775 at 52. And we're looking at 6500, which is showing peak horsepower at 846. And then torque, about 6,000, 5,500 to 6,000 is, well, I guess 5,500 is showing 753. So this is real world versus software. So this was 774 at 52, so was reading that a little bit lower. But between 5,000 and 5,500 on here, we're showing 740 to 753. So it's probably right in that range where we're getting the peak at on there. And then, of course, as I said, 6,500 was 846 for our peak. 853. That's within 10 horsepower and 10 foot-pounds of torque. Mind-blowing right there. And I've done this on a couple other things. Let's go ahead and take a look at, I've got my buddy Justin's truck here. And this is pretty straightforward. This is a 5.3. Here on our short block, we can put in the name of it, cylinders, and it will calculate your cubic inches off your bore and stroke on there. And then you need to know your rod length. So that's pretty easy. Then on heads, open up your port flow window and plug in data. There's enough data out there on heads that we can find about anything. He's running 799 heads, And these are the flow values for 799 heads. You put in your inlet intake and exhaust diameter, stuff like that. So you can find most of that data out there. In fact, I don't think I have it loaded up on here. Let me see if I do. I don't. I did a set of PRC heads versus the 799 heads that he has installed right now, and it's a turbocharged setup, and he picked up about 70 to 75 horsepower just by going over to some as-cast PRC heads. A fairly cheap upgrade, and so it's pretty impressive the gains that picked up there. So you can play around with different cylinder heads, see whether or not they're going to add more power, take away power. Induction, you got a lot of different intake designs here. If you click the down box, you can see common intake. Then you got single plane, dual plane, LS1, LS6, high flow runners port. I selected that one, more of like a sheet metal intake on there, even though a single plane would probably work in that thing. It also has compact, sport, stuff like that. And then it's got individual throttle body stuff if you're running stacks. But the other side of it is you can open up your flow calc and pop in your, well, we don't have 8 throttles on this one, but we could pop in, that we've got one that's 3.62 inches, and it's going to calculate our CFM for whenever we're doing throttle bodies, because that's going to be a big calculation of how much air can we allow into the motor. Now, I have messed around with render tip a little bit. It will obviously shift power up. The cooler that is 180 seemed a little bit high to me because that's essentially engine temp. And if you're idling, it might be at 180, but the rest of the time your manifold temp's going to be, pretty significantly less. So then we move on to our turbo. This case, he has a T67 or T76. We put in all the stuff like the AR, the turbine size. You can play with the efficiency rating. 75% is the default on there. And then you can put your boost limit, IC drop, intercooler efficiency, and all that's going to change it. But the cool thing about it is it will show you whether or not it's calculating that it's going to get into surge, choke, or overspeed. Specifically, if you're running a supercharger, they've got different centrifugal superchargers and stuff like that in the software. A lot of those, if you're not careful, you can overspeed them. And so, but if we were to bump this thing up to 14 psi, you can see that we're getting into choke for sure, and we're on the verge of surge. So we can kind of see, based on the actual flow characteristics of this turbo, that on his setup, 12 psi is kind of the happy zone. And by adjusting all those, you can also see if you're picking up any horsepower, significant horsepower shifts by making those adjustments. And then kind of last but not least, we'll come back to camshaft there. Combustion, you can put your compression ratio in. Choose your head style. Most of these are going to be wedge style. If you're on a LS or a small block, they've got Hemi style in there. In fact, if you open chambers, it'll show you what all the chambers look like. And so in this situation, since we're running 799 heads, we're running a wedge open design. It says that, and it's got a timing rate in there, burn rate of like 26.7 degrees is going to be peak timing on that. And then finally, exhaust here, where we can choose, small headers, long tube headers, mufflers with cat, without cat, stuff like that. So let's go back to the cam section, which is huge. There's a lot that you can do here. And in fact, this is kind of loosely set up on a Trug Norris cam that he installed in there. It's cool because you can come in here, look at the overlap, duration, all that stuff. It'll show you how hard it's going to be on the valve train. So this qualifies as a mild race cam. You get up into 7, 8, 9, you're beating your valve train to death and stuff like that. And a lot of this stuff will automatically populate as you just put in the information off the cam card. And so it looks more complicated than it is, but it's actually not that bad. Surprisingly, this will allow you to do VVT cams. If you have a VVT cam, you just have to know the different spec range as you're plugging all that in. But one cool thing that you can do, and I'm not going to really do it on here, is they've got on this software the quick iterator testing and the pro iterator testing, where we'll start this up, find cam timing for the best or for highest horsepower at current horsepower plus or minus our current horsepower peak plus or minus 50, and you click that, and it's going to go through a bunch of simulations, and it's actually going to try a bunch of different durations, overlap, all this stuff on the cam to see what it come up with. And it's already come up with a cam that could theoretically provide 50 additional horsepower. Now keep in mind that these are a best case scenario. Some of the cam specs this might spit out might be a little bit unrealistic, and which means they may be completely undrivable. They may have great horsepower up at the peak. You know, if you're looking for a peak of 6,000, it may, you know, give you 50.7 horsepower, but the dynamics of the cam will make the idle on it just completely undrivable, stuff like that. So take it with a grain of salt, but it does give you an idea of kind of an area to work in. And the cool thing about it is whenever you buy this software, it gives you the option to install a bunch of cam profiles, like 6,000 different cam profiles, and you can open those up and literally find like comp cam part numbers or grind numbers in there, load those up and see what they'll do for your setup, and play around and see what different cams are going to create different power curves for you. And then one of the last things I kind of want to highlight here is the where is the 3D engine pressure flow display. And this is showing you what's going on in your number one, or whichever one's the top dead center at 0 degrees. And you can scroll through here and see, okay, so at this point in time, we're pushing the exhaust out. I don't know why that arrow is not showing up. There we go. Pushing the exhaust out. And you'll start seeing whenever you get, now the intake valve's opening, we're drawing intake air in. We're going to be pulling air into the cylinder. Exhaust air is still going out. And then there, our exhaust is stopped. We might see some reversion. On this cam, we may not. There's some reversion on the exhaust. And then, boom, we're at the bottom. We're starting compression. We're getting reversion back into the intake track while the valve shuts. Now the valve's shut, and we're just in standard compression. So you can see all these things. And to give you an idea, it gets a lot more complicated with the more aggressive cam that you've got. Now, where this really came into it for me was, here's the smoke monster as we know it. With the heads, intake, cam, and this is with the new intake on it. This isn't with the old intake that's currently on the car. This is the intake I bought. And this is where we kind of came out to be. Ugly. Ugly, ugly, ugly. The power numbers were way down. So we were looking at 675 horsepower. Peaks at 5,500. And this is an improvement, significant improvement over where we were at even with the old intake and throttle body, because if you go over to like the Pro data, you can see over here like intake manifold pressure remains fairly consistent all the way up to 8,500 RPMs. We start at 14.6, which is atmospheric, and we drop down to about 14.48. Now, on the old intake manifold and old throttle body, around 4,500, 5,000, this number tanks, and we started losing a lot of power. Now, I've gone in and kind of spec'd out what I need to do to get the power that I'm looking for. And so let's look at our graphs. This is as is now. This is the power that I'm looking for. And you can see this gets us up to, 850 horsepower. Pretty significant over 625, 650. I guess that's about 675 to 850. And the big things that's going to make the big difference on this is new heads. My heads are too small for my motor. Even though they're listed as being compatible with a 598, they're on the small side of a 598. Brodix makes a BB3 head that gives us the flow that we need in order to pick up over 150 horsepower. And something else that I noticed, this is with the new cam that I bought from Urson, that cam in my current setup picks up 6 horsepower. Not even worth cracking the motor open for. But with these heads, that cam then changes to picking up 24 horsepower. So That's where we can kind of theory test all of this out and figure out whether or not our investment is going to be good for making power. And I'm telling you, for 150 bucks, you don't have to be running, a $20,000 big block or anything. You can have your junkyard motor on here and see, hey, 799 heads. If I run this cam, this is what I should get. If I try this cam, okay, there's where I'm picking it up, but I'm losing power down low maybe. You can see the torque band shift, the power band shift, all that stuff rotates around the axis, the 5250. You'll see that where whenever you're picking it up top, you're losing it down low. You can see all that, but you can also see, hey, this is what 799 heads flow. This is what another head flows, and test out a bunch of different heads. And it allows you to theory out all of your upgrades before spending your money. So hopefully this kind of helps you guys out in making the decision. As I said, this is Dynosim6. The website, let me pull it up, is ProSim Racing or ProRacingSim.com. I'll put a link down in the description. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you have any experience with the software, if you've tried it in the past. As I said, I ran the desktop Dyno 5 and got bad numbers. They were consistent numbers, but the skew was off on them. And the cool thing about this Dynosim6 is you can also plug in a bunch of different things like air density, temperature, altitude, and see how those different parameters are going to affect your vehicle and drop your horsepower down. The thing that really sold it for me is I went through, plugged all this in, and then got the output of what it was saying that my car was making right now. I plugged that into a quarter-mile calculator. And Wallace Racing or something like that. There's plenty of them out there. And you plug in the weight, 3,200 scale weight. Know that for a fact. We ran it across the scales with me in the car, 3,200. Plugged in the peak horsepower that it said it was making, and it came up and said that the best time that the car was going to be capable of is probably about a 10.67. We ran a 10.7. And was never able to get it faster than that. So we were already knocking on the door of what the motor was capable of whenever we were racing it. Now, with the new heads, that drops down to about 9.6. So we're going to shave almost a full second off by doing one upgrade. Now, granted, this upgrade is going to be about $5,000 for these heads, but it's hard to beat that price per performance upgrade on something like this, where seldom can you go out whenever you have a 10-second car and just spend $5,000 and pick up a full second on there. So, and I would not have known about it without running this. Now, will the real world bear fruit? I'm not sure. But as I said, I have tested this versus known good data, and it comes back. It's fairly accurate. It's all math at the end of the day. So there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to pick up a significant amount of data. And then as long as everything's working on the chassis side of the car, a significant amount of time. So thanks for stopping by, everybody. You guys know the drill. ABT, always be tuning.